Take your brat and go to hell, my husband shouted during the divorce trial. But when the judge read my inheritance, the entire room froze. Everyone froze. The judge, the clerk, the court reporter whose fingers stopped mid-sentence over her keys. Even Javier's attorney, the smirking man in the gray suit who had spent the last 40 minutes performing certainty, went completely still. My son pressed his face into my shoulder. I put my hand on the back of his head and held him there, and did not move. Javier stood at the plaintiff's table with his chest out and his jaw set, the posture of a man who has already written the ending of the story he is currently inside. He had been wearing that posture all morning. He had been wearing it in various configurations for 6 months, ever since he walked into our kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon and asked for a divorce the way you ask for the check at a restaurant, ready to leave, already mentally gone. He hadn't seen my file yet. The judge turned a page, then another. Her eyebrows lifted, slightly, the restrained expression of a professional encountering something unexpected and noting it without performance. There's something else, she said. I need to tell you about my hands before I tell you anything else. I have been cleaning houses since I was 23 years old. Professional cleaning, residential, and some light commercial, 3 to 4 clients a day, the kind of work that accumulates in the body over time, the way all physical work does. In my knuckles, in the specific ache that starts at the base of my spine around 2 p.m. and is fully present by the time I get home. My hands are not soft. They have not been soft in 11 years. They are the hands of a woman who works, which is a fact I have made peace with, and which Javier, in the years I was with him, referenced with a frequency I understand now was designed to remind me of my position relative to his. My name is Sofia Reyes. I am 34 years old. I have a son named Mateo who is 6, who has his father's mouth in my eyes and who ran to me that morning in the courtroom before either of our attorneys had said a word and pressed himself into my side with the full-body certainty of a child who has decided where his safety is located. I held him there. I had been holding him for 6 months. I want to tell you about the 5 years before the Tuesday afternoon because they are the context for everything that follows. Javier Ramirez was 37 when I married him. He is handsome in a specific, deliberate way, the kind of man who has always understood that his appearance is a tool and has used it with precision. He works in construction management. He is confident and charming and socially gifted, the kind of person who talks to everyone at a party and makes each person feel like the conversation mattered. He is also the kind of person who has always had a theory about whose money is whose. His money, his, a buffer, a resource, a thing he managed and decided about and deployed according to his own calculations. My money, ours, a contribution to the household, a shared resource, a pool he accessed with the comfortable ease of someone who has never needed to ask permission. This was not a fight we had. It was a structure we lived in. I understood it incrementally, the way you understand a room's dimensions by walking it in the dark, not by seeing it clearly, but by finding its edges one at a time. I cleaned 3 houses on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 4 on Tuesdays. I was home by 4 o'clock, which gave me enough time to shower and start dinner before Mateo needed to be picked up from my mother's, and Javier came home from whatever he was calling his current investment. The investments were the other structure. Javier had been chasing investments for as long as I had known him. A restaurant partnership that dissolved after 6 months, a $12,000 loss split between us, a real estate syndication that had required $18,000 of my savings to participate in and had returned nothing, a construction equipment rental scheme that I had not understood and had contributed $7,000 to because he had presented it as urgent and obvious, and my hesitation as a failure of trust. Each one was explained to me after the fact. Each one was described as temporary. Each one was, when it failed, reframed as a learning experience or bad luck or the fault of a partner who hadn't delivered. I stopped counting at $40,000. I kept cleaning houses. The first time I smelled it was a Thursday in February. He had come home late, later than usual, which I had stopped tracking precisely because the tracking had begun to feel like a kind of surveillance, and I did not want to be that person. He kissed me on the cheek when he came in. Routine, correct. And on his collar, just below the jawline, a smell that was not his cologne and not my perfume, and was not ambiguous to anyone who has ever spent time close enough to another person to know what they smell like. I stood in the kitchen and held the edge of the counter and thought about what I had just registered. Then I told myself the reasonable things. A colleague, a hug, proximity in a work situation that had no other meaning. I told myself these things with the specific diligence of someone who understands they are telling themselves things, and is doing it anyway because the alternative requires a response she is not yet ready to give. I did not say anything. I kept tracking. 6 weeks of tracking. 7. The late evenings acquiring a pattern. The phone in his pocket, screen down on the table. A habit that developed with the casual naturalness of something that had been practiced until it looked accidental. In April, I confronted him. I had chosen the words. I had thought about the conversation for days. Not the accusation, exactly, but the opening. The honest question. The version that gave him the chance to tell me something true. Javier, I said, I need to ask you something. He looked up from his phone, unguarded, in the way of someone who is not expecting this. Are you seeing someone? He laughed. Actual laughter. Not the uncomfortable laugh of someone caught, but the full, dismissive laugh of a man who has decided the question is beneath the dignity of a real answer. Cheat on you? Please. When would I even have the time? The laugh was still in his voice when he said it, like the idea was inherently absurd, like I was charming for bringing it up. I looked at him. Something hardened inside inside me that night. Not rage, something colder and more permanent. The specific hardening of a person who has understood, in a single sentence, that the relationship they are in is not the one they thought they were in, that the man across from them has decided they are not worth the truth. I said nothing else. I went to bed. I started keeping records the next morning. 2 months after that conversation, a letter arrived from an attorney's office. I almost didn't open it. Legal mail has a particular quality of dread that makes you want to leave it on the counter for a day or two before dealing with it, but I opened it that afternoon at the kitchen table, with Mateo at school and Javier at work. My uncle Mauricio had died. Mauricio Reyes was my father's younger brother. He was a loner. The family called him that, the word they used when they meant difficult to understand and separate from us in ways we can't explain. He had never married. He had worked in construction for 30 years and had, apparently, invested what he earned with the specific patience of a man who had no one to spend it on and no reason to rush. He had left me something, a commercial lot in the city center, approximately 2,800 square meters, currently leased. The attorney's letter said, current market valuation pending final probate assessment, estimated range $3.8 to $4.2 million. I sat on the kitchen floor. I sat there for a long time. Then I dried my eyes and I called my attorney, a woman named Carmen Solis, 8 years in family law and property rights, who I had found 6 weeks earlier through a colleague and had already consulted twice, quietly, about what I would need to do when Javier made the move I had been anticipating. Don't mention it, I said. Not until the day of the trial. A pause. Sophia, Carmen said carefully. That's an unusual instruction. I know, I said. Do you understand why I'm giving it? Another pause. Longer. Then, yes, she said. I understand exactly. I told no one else. Not my mother. Not my sisters. Not the friends who would have wanted to celebrate and in celebrating would have made keeping the secret impossible. Definitely not Javier. 6 months after the letter, Javier came home on a Tuesday afternoon and asked for a divorce, like it was a transaction he'd decided to execute. Like he had run the numbers and found the outcome favorable and was now moving forward with implementation. I think we've grown apart, he said, the phrase of someone who has been practicing. Call your lawyer, I said. He blinked. He had expected something else. Tears, perhaps, or the frozen speechlessness of someone who has been ambushed. I had been expecting this for 6 months. I had spent 6 months making sure I was not ambushable. His attorney was a man named Rodolfo Vargas. I learned this from Carmen 2 days before the first hearing. I also learned from Carmen that he had a specific professional style, aggression in small settings, paperwork delays, and a tendency to frame his clients' positions as so favorable that opposing counsel would do better to settle than to waste the court's time. The initial meeting was in Vargas's office, which he had apparently designed to be visually intimidating. Heavy furniture, framed credentials, the specific decor of a man who charges by the atmosphere. He opened by looking at the documents Carmen had filed and then at me, over his reading glasses, with the smile of a man who has done a calculation and found the math comfortable. My client is prepared to be generous, he said. Given your financial profile, no assets, no savings, no professional qualifications, he's offering $200 a month in support. It's more than the court would likely require. The smile widened slightly. I suggest you take it before his patience changes. $200 a month for the woman who had put $40,000 into his investments, for the woman who had cleaned 4 houses a day to keep the household while he chased schemes that evaporated, for the woman who had sat in a chair across from an attorney and was being offered a figure that would not cover a week of groceries. I smiled. Okay, I said. Vargas blinked. He had expected negotiation. He had expected tears or anger or the counteroffer he had prepared for. He had not expected a woman who said okay and kept her hands still in her lap. He looked at Carmen. Carmen said nothing. Well, Vargas said, rearranging himself. We'll proceed with that understanding. I nodded. I drove home. I called Carmen from the parking structure. How's the file? I said. Complete, she said. Every document. Chronological. I had the probate office confirm the release timing. It will all be admissible by the hearing date. Good, I said. Sophia, Carmen said, when this lands, it's going to be a significant moment in that room. I know, I said. Are you ready for it? I thought about my hands, the 11 years of houses, the $40,000. The laugh he gave me when I asked if he was seeing someone. Yes, I said. I've been ready for a while. The morning of the trial, Mateo woke up at 6. He came into my room and climbed into the bed beside me and put his small hand on my arm and said nothing. He does this sometimes, appears without asking and offers presents without words. He is 6 years old and already understands things about comfort that some adults never do. I had told him, in the honest and age-appropriate way Carmen had suggested, that we were going to court today to talk to a judge about our family situation. I had told him he didn't need to worry. I had told him I would be right there the whole time. Are you scared, Mama? He said, into the pillow. I thought about the answer. No, I said. I know what's going to happen. He seemed to accept this. We lay there for another few minutes in the early quiet. Then we got up and got dressed, and I drove us to the courthouse with Carmen's file in my bag and the specific calm of a person who has prepared for something as completely as preparation allows and is now simply waiting for it to begin. Javier was already in the corridor when we arrived. He looked at me with the expression he had been wearing since the Tuesday he asked for the divorce, a kind of settled indifference, the look of someone who has decided the transaction is a formality. He looked at Mateo with something more complicated, briefly, and then looked away. His attorney stood beside him in the gray suit, suit, already performing confidence, the comfortable stance of a man who expects the next 2 hours to be routine. I looked at them both. Then I looked at Carmen. She had my file in a briefcase, organized, tabbed, specific. 8 months of work. Ready? She said. Yes, I said. We went in. The hearing proceeded as these things do. Procedural, documented, the careful accumulation of record that family court requires before it decides anything. Vargas presented Javier's position first. The marriage had deteriorated. Both parties were moving on. The financial division was straightforward given the limited joint assets. He said limited joint assets with the easy confidence of a man whose client had told him there was nothing worth finding. Carmen listened. She did not interrupt. She did not challenge. She let Vargas build the picture he was building, and she sat with her folder closed, and she waited. Then the judge, her honor judge, Beatriz Morales, 17 years on the family court bench, with the specific focus of someone who reads cases carefully and does not form conclusions before the record is complete, looked at the documents before her and said, "Counsel, I have some additional materials in the plaintiff's file." Vargas looked up, confusion briefly, before he composed it. "Your Honor, I believe all documents have been filed in advance." "These were filed in advance," Judge Morales said, "by the plaintiff's counsel. I'm reviewing them now." She turned a page, then another. Her eyebrows, the controlled, practiced eyebrows of a judge who does not perform, lifted slightly. "There's something else," she said. Javier shifted in his seat. Beside me, Mateo pressed his face into my shoulder. "Mr. Ramirez," Judge Morales said, setting the page down and looking at him directly. "Were you employed as project supervisor at Garcia y Asociados Construction Company between 2019 and 2022? Javier's brow furrowed. "Yes." "Why does that?" "Because the commercial property your wife inherited from her late uncle is currently under lease to that company." She looked at the document. The lease was executed in 2019. Monthly payments of $45,000 paid to the estate of Mauricio Reyes, held in probate during the period of the estate's administration. She looked up. "Those payments are now released. We are discussing $1.62 million in accumulated rental income, solely your wife's property." The room did not move. I do not mean the people became still. I mean the room itself seemed to stop. The air, the light, the particular quality of a space in which something significant is landing and everyone present understands it simultaneously. Javier's color left in stages, not all at once. First the warmth went, then the underlying tone, until what remained was the specific gray-white of a man whose body has redirected its resources away from his face. Vargas made a sound, not words, a sound. "There is also a second document," Judge Morales said. She picked it up. "Your signature appears on the lease renewal authorization from 2021. As project supervisor for Garcia y Asociados, you co-signed the authorization confirming the lease terms and payment structure for the property at this address." She set it down. "The same property your wife now owns." Vargas put his hand on Javier's arm. Carmen stood. "Your Honor, I would also draw the court's attention to Exhibit F, a correspondence dated 18 months ago, sent from Mr. Ramirez's company email, in which he wrote," she paused, finding the line, though I suspect she had memorized it. "My wife may have a connection to the deceased owner of the Reyes lot on Avenida Central. I'll investigate and confirm when appropriate." The room absorbed this. "That email was sent," Carmen continued, "exactly 18 months ago, 14 days before Mr. Ramirez filed his initial divorce petition, 12 days before his counsel presented my client with a settlement offer of $200 per month." She sat down. Judge Morales looked at Javier. "Mr. Ramirez," she said, "you signed documents related to a lease on a property you had reason to believe your wife might have an interest in. You then filed for divorce 2 weeks after an email in which you stated you were investigating that connection, and you authorized a settlement offer of $200 per month to a woman you had reason to believe had just inherited approximately $4 million in property." Javier's mouth opened. Nothing. Vargas leaned close, whispered. Javier shook his head once, then stopped. "The inheritance is sole property of the plaintiff under current statutes," Judge Morales said, with the flat finality of a judge who has reached a conclusion and is now stating it for the record. "It is not subject to marital division. You will pay $3,500 per month in child support, plus all documented medical and educational expenses for Mateo Ramirez, to be reviewed annually." She looked at him steadily. "If you choose to appeal any portion of this judgment, I strongly suggest you first consult with criminal counsel regarding the potential implications of the email in Exhibit F and the lease authorization documents as they relate to concealment of marital knowledge. That may be a conversation worth having before you proceed." The gavel came down. In the hallway, he tried to reach me. He had the expression of a man who has lost a thing and has not yet understood that the loss is permanent, still in the phase where he believes that words are available to him, that if he finds the right ones, the situation becomes recoverable. "Sophia, please." This got out of hand. "I can explain the email. It wasn't what—" Carmen stepped between us with the practiced ease of someone who has done this many times. I did not stop walking. I did not look back. Mateo was beside me, his hand in mine. He was looking straight ahead with the focused attention of a 6-year-old who has decided to follow his mother's lead and is doing it well. "Mama," he said, as we pushed through the courthouse doors into the afternoon. "Yes? Are we okay?" I looked at my son, his father's mouth, my eyes, the specific, particular person who was made partly from the choices I had made and partly from things that had nothing to do with choices at all. "Yes," I said. "We're okay." "Good," he said. He He held my hand. We walked to the car. I want to tell you about Uncle Mauricio, because he deserves more than a line. He was 61 when he died. He never married, never had children, lived in an apartment near the lot he had purchased in 1998 for $180,000 with 30 years of construction wages, and the patience of a man who understood that a good piece of land in a growing city does not stay $180,000 forever. He had a cat. He called my father twice a year. He came to family gatherings occasionally and stood in the corner nursing a beer and watching, and everyone said he was odd and distant and the family loner, and nobody asked him what he was thinking about. He was thinking about the lot. He was thinking about compound appreciation and long-term lease structures and the specific patience of a man who has decided that the most useful thing he can do with money is leave it somewhere good and wait. He left it to me, not my sisters, not my mother, not the cousins who had spoken to him more recently or the relatives who had made more effort. Me. I asked his attorney after the probate was settled whether Mauricio had said anything about why. The attorney, a quiet man named Pablo Estrada, who had handled Mauricio's affairs for 12 years, looked at me for a moment. He said, Pablo told me carefully, that you were the only one in the family who worked with your hands and didn't apologize for it. I sat with that. I thought about my hands, the cracks, the ache, the 11 years of houses. He also said, Pablo added, that he'd watched how your husband talked about your work, and he wanted you to have something that was entirely yours. He had watched. He had been watching and saying nothing and building something. For me, I did not cry in Pablo's office. I cried later, at home, at the kitchen table where Javier had once laughed at me for asking an honest question. I cried for a while and then I stopped, and I made Mateo's lunch for the next day and went to bed. The lot is currently generating $45,000 a month in lease income. The lease with Garcia y Asociados has 4 years remaining, after which I will have the option to renew or develop. Carmen has connected me with a property development attorney named Rodrigo Vega, 11 years in commercial real estate, recommended by 3 separate people who know the field, who is reviewing the options. The $1. $62 million in accumulated rental income is in an account with my name only. Javier's first child support payment arrived on the 1st of the following month, on time, which his attorney had apparently emphasized to him as the expected standard. I don't know what happened between him and the woman whose perfume I'd smelled on his collar. I don't know, and I have found, went with some surprise, that I do not need to. That particular door has closed, and what is behind it is his problem now. Mateo started first grade in September. He is doing well.